Was it Ineos? Was it Formula One? Who squeaked? They got our boy Alonso. Cunning, as Lauda would say, he added. Summary of the Fred resurgence so far. Both Saubers suck. The Alpines still suck. This is where we're at. Well. It was another drama-filled week for F1, for the Human Rights Desert Wasteland Grand Prix that doesn't even have alcohol. And the race itself was actually okay. I'm going to break down everything that happened in and around, mostly around, the 2024 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. I'm Lockie. Let's get locked in. Verstappen and Russell brought back discussions of driver health and safety, talking about the ride height of the cars since 2022 when they were changed to the ground effect regulations, and how now the cars ride much lower and they're harsh over the bumps. Also, the suspension regulations were simplified, I believe, in 2022, which led to them being very harsh, and obviously with them running so close to the ground, they bottom out a lot. Yeah, it was cute of them to think that we had time to talk about that. In the lead up to the weekend, a writer for the Road and Track magazine, Kate Wagner, who usually covers cycling, but also has an awesome blog about McMansions, which you might have heard about at some point in the last couple of years, I think it came up. She was invited by Mercedes sponsor Ineos to cover the Austin Grand Prix last year, with the expectation obviously being that she'd have nice things to say about the Ineos Grenadier they were showing off to journalists. I don't know, maybe because it has an indicator light just for cyclists or something. I don't know, maybe they thought she'd have nice things to say about that. I'm not really sure why she was invited. Instead of doing that, thankfully, she wrote an absolutely epic journal of her experience, especially of the obscene wealth and power on display, and how companies like Ineos wield that power to flatter and placate journalists. And while she was at it, she managed to capture the magic of F1 in better words than I've ever read, particularly this bit. When we got into the garage, Lewis's car was naked, its insides visible for all to see. I think this was the moment where my respect for the sport as it exists really made itself clear. It's hard to describe what I felt looking at that car. The closest phrase I have at my disposal is the technological sublime. I pictured a living, breathing animal of extraterrestrial origin hooked up to 1,000 arcane sensors that delivered messages in little pulses. All the tubes and sculpted carbon fiber parts and the endless net of wires, all working in service to the Godhead engine, formed something totally incomprehensible to me, a feat of engineering so vast it breached the realm of magic. Hamilton himself walked through in his helmet unexpectedly on an errand. After being in presence of the car, I perceived him differently than before, when he was just a guy driving in circles on TV. The scope of his capabilities became more directly known to me in the face of that which I believed to be unknowable. All of that was built in service of him. It's a truly fantastic piece of writing and highlights a part of F1 that both deserves more scrutiny, but also, for me at least, is part of the mystique and intrigue of the sport. Something that I wish didn't have to exist, but that I also can't look away from, which made it all the more fascinating and disconcerting when the article was taken down, not long after it was published. Was it Ineos? Was it Formula One? Who squeaked? No. Apparently, the editor-in-chief of Road and Track, who had just started the Monday after the article was published on a Friday, pulled it himself, saying, "The story was taken down because I felt it was the wrong story for our publication. No one from the brands or organizations mentioned in the story put any sort of pressure on me or anyone else. In fact, I heard nothing at all from anyone on the story, no contact whatsoever. It was unfortunate, and I can understand how people might jump to the conclusion that pressure of some sort was brought to bear. It wasn't. Truth is, when the story was assigned, written, and edited, I was executive editor of Road and Track, not editor-in-chief. I was dealing almost exclusively with the print magazine. The story had been assigned and edited by the digital team. Had I been aware of the story, I would have put a stop to it long before it ever posted." He went on to say, "I'm afraid this is a much more mundane situation than you might have imagined." No, I'm afraid you've just taken down the only article thousands of people have or ever would read in your publication. Like a real piece of journalism. God, what an idiot. Now thousands of people are not heading to Road and Track. They're heading here. Seriously, it's a must read. Save that link for later. Next up, Saudi Arabia reveals the Qiddiya city circuit with a crazy 80-meter elevated first corner on a huge bridge. It just looks crazy. I mean, if anyone's gonna make it happen, Saudi Arabia will, and I guess I'll take that. Yeah, rather one of the good countries could pull something like that off, but you know, Saudi Arabia wants to sport wash, so here we are. And unfortunately, they got our boy Alonso. The proposed new circuit at Qiddiya City looks set to be one of the most impressive facilities for motorsports worldwide, with high-speed thrills, incredible elevation, immersive attractions, and experiences that'll excite the fans like never before. Good on you, Alonso, get that paycheck. So this track would replace Jeddah. I don't know, I kind of like Jeddah, so yeah, but whatever. Maybe this one will be... I mean, this one certainly looks crazier, so that's something. Jeddah's already pretty crazy. Whatever. If we're gonna race in Saudi Arabia, let's let them spend absolutely unreasonable amounts of money making it the best it can be. And us fans can just act like we're kind of pocketing that money and hopefully getting something good out of it, and never forget that it's Saudi Arabia and it kind of sucks that we're racing there. Anyway, enough of that. Audi. So after the rumors that Audi might actually pull out and not go through with their plan to take over Sauber in 2026, they put out a statement and said they will complete a 100% takeover of Sauber ahead of 2026 rather than the planned 75% takeover. So they doubled down, which is good to see, because the absolute state of Sauber right now, Jesus, they got to sort something out. Audi's going to have their work cut out for them. But yeah, I think this is pretty good news. Another works team. Of course, it wouldn't be a 2024 race weekend without an update to the Horny saga. So the Horner complainant was suspended, as the BBC reported on the Thursday before the race, and is said to have been paid 700,000 euros. I don't know, the evidence on that is pretty sketchy. Perez came out in support of Horner, but that wasn't a surprise. He has no respect for women. Jerry has been paraded around the past 2 races in a clear display of defiance, and Horner has gone into victim mode now, starting to cite the toll all this is taking on his family. Boo-hoo. Helmut Marko under review? This was a question going into this weekend, as he said on Friday to Austrian broadcaster ORF that he could be suspended very soon. So it sounds like he could have been baiting Red Bull to fire him to activate Max's escape clause, saying Max could leave if Helmut leaves. And Max said on Friday after qualifying that Helmut has to stay at Red Bull. So it sounded like if Marko were to be removed, that Max would consider triggering that supposed exit clause. Then on Saturday, Red Bull GmbH majority shareholder Charlam Yudova, I think that's how you say it, I don't know, also said to Max's manager on Monday before the race weekend, "No one is bigger than the team," and signaled that he would test the legality of Max's escape clause if he were to dip with Helmut Marko. Horner parrots this and says, "Nobody bigger than Red Bull," kind of talking about this Marko Verstappen thing. Then on Saturday, there's a meeting between Helmut Marko and Red Bull GmbH CEO of Corporate Projects and Investments, Oliver Mintzlaff, and Helmut said that was a good conversation. Then he denies being part of the messages leaking, which was kind of what sparked all of this in the first place, and says that he's going to remain with the team after this meeting with Oliver Mintzlaff. But he also said, "To associate me with it, the leaking, was almost like a planned operation. Cunning, as Lauda would say," he added. That's not the first time Lauda's going to get mentioned in all of this. In another twist, Red Bull CEO of the beverage portion of the business, Franz Watzlawick, was also seen in the paddock for the first time. A meeting between Watzlawick, Mintzlaff and Yudova was rumored to be taking place on Sunday in Dubai, where these men would discuss what to do next. Watzlawick was rumored to be concerned about the Horny saga's impact on beverage sales. Following the meeting, Eric Van Haren, the journalist who originally reported on the Horny files, reported that Yudova had been swayed and that Horner would be fired. Considering I'm very late to make this video, that did not happen. According to German publication Motorsport Total, the woman accusing Horner is preparing to go public this week also didn't end up happening. But this does seem very much not over. On the 12th of March, it seemed like she was right about to appeal the results of Red Bull's investigation. It's been reported that she's changed her legal representation, so that could be potentially in relation to the leaks, like if she wasn't happy with how that was handled, her being doxxed, unfortunately. But that's pure speculation, so that seems to me to signal that her legal representation was involved in the leaking, and it wasn't someone like Helmut Marko or the Verstappens, although I wouldn't put it past Verstappen Sr. in particular. Her change of representation also extended her deadline to appeal Red Bull's decision, and on the 16th of March, she lodged an official complaint with the FIA. We'll see what happens with that. Knowing the FIA, probably not much, but yeah, stay tuned. This is not over. On the back of all of this discussion about turmoil at Red Bull were the rumors of Max to Mercedes. Toto said that he would love to have him and that all teams would do handstands to have him in the car, obviously. But he seemed really serious, even weighing in after the Marko axing rumors, likening Marko to a Niki Lauda figure and saying that Mercedes would absolutely love to have him, joking that they're missing their old mascot as Lauda was, and referencing Lauda's signature red cap. Miss that guy. He should never be compared to Helmut Marko again. I have no doubt that if Red Bull proceeded to sack Marko, Toto would have absolutely swooped Max and Marko together. So it sounds like if Red Bull were considering that, Toto was kind of playing his hand and Red Bull backed down. So enough of the Red Bull shit. Fred Vasseur, and what I'm calling the Fred Vassurgence. Leclerc came out ahead of the weekend on Wednesday saying he thought Vasseur would need more time to change Ferrari, so good noises coming from him. And there's this sense that Fred last year and now at the start of the year seems to have really made his mark on Ferrari, which is super encouraging for the future. Ferrari poached Mercedes driver development director Jerome D'Ambrosio, who was tipped as a potential Toto Wolff replacement in the long-term plan at Mercedes, served as Mercedes team principal at races where Wolff wasn't there. Here's a summary of the Fred Vassurgence so far. He's obviously secured Hamilton for 2025, brought in a new technical director, and he's got the backing of Carlos and Leclerc in the present. So, is the future Ferrari? There are also quotes from Newey from a while back that have been resurfacing and floating around this week, with him having said that he has regrets about never working with Ferrari. Also, to start off this week, there have been several reports in the Italian F1 media that acquiring Newey is Ferrari's #1 priority. So, Newey to Ferrari, will we see it happen? Also, apparently this guy is the Ferrari president, and I only just found that out, and he looks ridiculous. Another story got sadly lost with everything else that was going on this weekend, but Andretti released pictures of their planned US base. They also recently took possession of their Silverstone base where aerodynamics will be done. No one talked about it because there was a bunch of other stuff going on, to be fair, but lest we forget, Andretti is still cooking out here, and let's hope they take the grid. Oh no, we'll see. Let's hit the track, finally. So Sainz was feeling horrible right before FP1, managed to make FP1 and FP2, then he was diagnosed with appendicitis and required surgery. So Oliver Bearman, F2 driver, subbed in at Ferrari. He only had one practice session to get to grips with the car before quali and the race, so whatever he managed, like just finishing, would be super impressive. He's only 18, younger than Alonso's first victory. Yeah, and luckily Sainz recovered towards the end of the weekend, undergoing a smooth operation. Glad he's okay. He was right back in the paddock to watch the race after his surgery. Hobbling around a lot, looked like he was in pain, but seems like he was okay, so that's good. FP2 was delayed for another drain cover. It was only in front of the garages, not on track, but still. Can we every time before a race starts, can we get someone to go check the drain covers before so that we don't get delays for these stupid things? Like, come on. In FP2, there was a pretty scary impeding incident with Sargent on a flying lap and Hamilton in the middle of the road. It was very, very close. Hate to see it, especially at this track. I feel like that's something, I mean, in general, in practice and quali, like the cars going slowly and other cars on flying laps approaching at high speed has always been a dangerous situation, but particularly on this track where there's kind of nowhere really to go at times, and it's hard to see. Sargent did well to get out of the way of that one, because it was really hard for him to see approaching at full speed. Heading into quali now, and Stroll set his fastest time in Q1. Always getting it in when it counts, old Lance Stroll. After crashing heavily in FP3, Joe just missed out on being able to set a time by 3 seconds. Legendary work from the Sauber mechanics there to try and get him out, but just missed it. It was really close, but Bottas didn't make past the top 5 anyway, so probably wouldn't have really helped. I don't think he would have made Q2 anyway, but you know, still sucks to not be able to set a lap. Behrman was just, you would think that he had so much confidence the way he was driving. I don't know if it was necessarily a good thing, but he was on those barriers, nearly hitting the walls a few times, right on the limit. And yeah, he's just, yes, brave, but also lucky, I think, that he didn't crash with some of those brushes against the wall. It was really close. Speaking of, Piastri, he actually clonked the wall massively, and I think that's the hardest I've seen an F1 car hit a wall and not get damaged, so super lucky there. And then the rest of Q1, Bottas, Ocon, Gasly, Sargent, and Joe were knocked out. No real surprises there. Both Saubers suck. The Alpines still suck. This is where we're at. Q2 now, and Hulk was out with a power unit failure, causing a red flag early in the session. Really sucked for him. He was having a good weekend up to that point, and still managed points in the race, which we'll get to soon. All in all, wasn't the end of the world for him, but still caused a red flag. This one hurts. Ricciardo out in P14, last in Q2. Feel like this might be a theme of the year, especially with me making this video late and seeing Australia as well. Let's hope he picks it up. I don't know, I still have faith. Anyway, we'll talk about Ricciardo more later, I think. Behrman also missed out by 0.03 of a second to Hamilton, who again has just started this season off on a pretty poor foot, really, with not being able to find speed in the car. And yeah, here he just scrapes by into Q3. But Behrman, pretty impressive. I mean, you can't expect anything more than that with only an hour in the car before the session. It is a Ferrari, but pretty decent effort to be on pace with Lewis. And again, look at this. What is he doing? He was so close to the barriers. Could have been a completely different story, I think, for Behrman this entire weekend, really. Everyone kind of singing his praises because he made it through. He scored good points, but it could have easily been so different. I think he got lucky more than he was really proving himself. It didn't go wrong, so he looks like a hero. If it did go wrong, he would not have. We also, so out in Q2, we lost Behrman, Albon, Magnussen, Ricciardo, and Hulk. Pretty brutal for Ricciardo there, especially with Tsunoda being so high and making Q3. Pretty tough. We'll follow along with this narrative for the rest of the season, I'm sure. Q3. So, Tsunoda beats Stroll. Big surprise and great look for Tsunoda in his battle for the Red Bull seat, which is probably not even a real battle for the Red Bull seat, considering Carlos is out of a seat and might get it. I don't know. This silly season is going to be crazy. We'll talk about that later. Tsunoda beating Stroll. Pretty poor from Stroll to do his fastest lap in Q1. I mean, you're supposed to build through the qualifying session, so not sure what that was about. Alonso's lap in Q3 was insane. If you can watch the onboard, I recommend it. It is really tight. Didn't see any of it on TV though, just right at the end. Q3 ended with the Verstappen pole, then Leclerc, then Perez, and Alonso's P4. I mean, that's insane. The Aston is clearly far slower on pace than the McLaren, the Mercedes. I mean, that's a remarkable P4 for me. I think very underrated performance there. And fun fact, this was the 5th consecutive Max pole, Charles second. Yeah, F1 at the moment. We're doing great. We're doing great. On to the race. So Lando clearly jumped the start, as you'll see here, but he was not given a penalty. Right there, you can see he moves forward in his box, then stops again, and then gets going again. You know he jumped the start because Officer Russell was straight on the case. In the end, he wasn't given a penalty. And the reason for that was that in the regulations, it states that the transponder has to trigger the jump start. But like, he jumped the start? Why can't we just use our eyes? If the transponder doesn't trigger, can't a visual check override the tech? What if he didn't stop again and actually kept going and carried through momentum from the jump start and ended up gaining an advantage, but the transponder didn't register it? What if he made places? Like, if the tech isn't bulletproof, surely we should be able to use a visual check as a backup. Ended up kind of looking ridiculous. I get that the FIA has to stick to the letter of the law, but hopefully they change that to allow a visual check to override the technology, because the technology clearly failed. He did jump the start, so weird that there isn't kind of a contingency, a blanket contingency really on all of the rules that says if the tech fails and the penalty can be given based on a visual check, then it should. Moving on, that didn't really affect the race at all. In the end, it was just weird. Early on, Charles and Perez had an epic side-by-side the first few corners. Perez got the jump, and Charles had huge bravery, sticking it up the inside of turn 1 here, keeping it stuck in. He survives the second corner, and then somehow Charles ended up ahead. Amazing racecraft there from Charles. That's what we love. That's what we love to see. It was very quick though. I wish they could do that kind of thing for the rest of the race. Next, Gasly. Retired on the first lap. Our first retirement of the season. Weird that we didn't have any in the first race still, but yeah. Pain for Alpine continues. The camera at turn 2 was calibrated all wrong and made the McLaren look red. This looks crazy. Some other people saw it, and so clearly it's not just me. It looked really amateurish. You would think that on the fly even they'd be able to fix that, but it was like this the whole weekend. The calibration was just off, and I'm surprised no one went and fixed it, or wonder if it was a technical issue with the cameras that couldn't be fixed. I mean, you would think they'd have a replacement or something. I don't know. Super weird. Then Perez, obviously it was coming, gets past Leclerc lap 4 with DRS. Woes. Overall, overtaking this weekend made me a bit concerned. Saudi was one of those tracks back in 2021 and 2022 where there was these passing and repassing and very, very close battles. And they changed the DRS on, I think, the last DRS zone so that the detection point isn't before the corner, which created the DRS chicken scenario. But that aside, it was a lot more difficult, it seemed. This is a very high-speed track with mostly high-speed corners, medium-speed corners, no real low-speed corners, so you can really see the effect of the dirty air has gotten a lot worse since 2022 when the cars were passing and repassing and really looked really easy to follow. So overall, the cars, so Verstappen's pole lap was actually faster than 2021, so the cars are approaching the speeds of 2021. I think they are easier overall to race than 2021, remembering too that at 2022, DRS was reduced at other tracks slightly. It's kind of hard to compare exactly, but it seems like the cars are as fast, maybe slightly easier to follow, but definitely not at the point where they were in 2022. And I think overall for the future of F1, with regulations that make overtaking and following easier, there needs to be policing of the rules and more year-on-year refinement to take away certain things that the teams come up with. I feel like the 2022 rules were kind of set and forget, and they need to continually update the rules year on year in minor ways, like not full regulations overhauls, but there needs to be more minor regulations overhauls, and I think the teams can handle it. They'll probably push back against more regulations changes year on year, but I think F1 needs to do it to hold on to gains that we make, because we just lose them. And then maybe 2026 we see back to the level of 2022, when we could have maybe seen an improvement beyond where we got in 2022. We'll see. 2026 could bring us a step above where we got in 2022, but yeah, something that I think F1, the FIA, need to be more on it year on year. Not long after this shot, same lap, just another corner ahead, Lance Stroll into the wall, lap 7. He fully dropped it. It was just his mistake. He clipped the inside wall of the corner leading up to that.
Yeah, hit that inside wall. Well called, Julian. That track rod was broken and easy to criticise, difficult to do, but he isn't a rookie.
Hit the wall.
Okay, can you bring it back, Lance?
No, I'm in the wall.
Alright, copy that.
The teams have got to learn to watch the race. There. Anyway, this caused a safety car, and there was just absolute chaos in the pits. Everyone except Norris, Hamilton, and Joe pitted, and Norris inherited the lead. So that kept it from being a lights to flag for Verstappen, at least. On the restart, Magnussen runs Albon out of space and gets his first 10-second penalty, which would prove very consequential for this race, and provide some of the only entertainment, really, of the second half. Verstappen DRS passes Norris very easily. Behrman manages to get past Tsunoda, Joe, and Hulk. Very impressive. He actually had the most overtakes of the race, starting in a Ferrari down in P11. Yeah, you can see, but I mean, he wasn't going to do any better in qualifying. That was a very good effort. So to actually get those passes done on track is what he had to do, and he did it. This is also where Piastri starts to become stuck behind Hamilton for ages. He runs off the road a couple times trying to make moves, but gives the position back. Ultimately, the McLaren just had no pace in a straight line, but obviously was running high downforce, and they had really good pace in the high-speed corners. So it was an interesting dynamic. I like when cars have different strengths and weaknesses that are very easy to kind of see clearly and pick up on, but very unlucky for Piastri, really. He just could not find a way past Hamilton. I mean, even with DRS, Hamilton seemed to pull away on the straights. It was just nuts. Magnussen gets his second 10-second penalty by running Tsunoda off the track. Another 10 seconds. So on the F1 TV broadcast, Jolyon and DC absolutely lose it, despite the fact that this was reported earlier in the week that the standard penalties had changed. So well, let's see it.
Brown actually on the grid as we're getting a replay. Magnussen, well, a bit messy over the curve, but did he really gain the advantage there? I think he'd got the majority of the pass done.
Oh, you are kidding me, aren't you? 10 seconds for that?
That's harsh. That's harsh.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, it might be harsh, but it was reported on. Now all of the overtaking off track incidents or track limits penalties are going to be 10 seconds. So it was funny that Jolyon and DC didn't know that ahead of the race. Also, I just disagree. I think that Magnussen couldn't have got the pass done. Or not, Magnussen had most of the pass done, but he couldn't complete the pass while staying on the track. He had got the pass done, but he had sent it too hard. He couldn't slow down. He had to go off the track. So I get what they're saying, like he'd made most of the pass done, but you can be fully past the driver and still not have fully like completed the move. You haven't got your car back on the racing line and back under control, so the pass isn't complete. It was a fair penalty. It was funny to see them freak out on F1 TV for some reason about that. That led to Haas's big brain move. So it's hard to tell here, but what I think happened is after he got his first 10-second penalty, the safety car happened. There was only Tsunoda ahead of him. Haas's strategy team was like, oh, if you get past Tsunoda and back the pack up, then Hülkenberg gets a gap to pit in. Joe in P11 P10 at the time had to pit again because he didn't pit under the safety car. So they knew that Hulk had a potential to get P10 if Magnussen backed the pack up and Hulk had a pit window. He did that. And where I think it gets a bit sketchy is that they probably made that call and told Magnussen, I think they told Magnussen before he passed Tsunoda off the track that he basically had to get past Tsunoda to back the pack up to get Hulk the point. So it's a good play, but it worries me for the racing of F1 that a driver knows he's already got a 10-second penalty. His race is arguably over, so he just takes another penalty just because he can, because it doesn't have any consequences. Then he's allowed to play this game of backing up the pack. So it was a good team call from Haas, and it led to some really entertaining racing. So here we got Tsunoda obviously getting really frustrated. We know how he is. He's tucked up right behind Magnussen, gets past, but Magnussen then repasses him, sends it, and Tsunoda ends up in his frustration losing places to Ocon and then eventually Albon. So not really great racecraft there from Tsunoda. It was a moment that I guess didn't really get called out. But Tsunoda here, obviously in his frustration, he's ended up losing places. Finally, for Piastri, after 20 laps stuck behind Hamilton in DRS, Hamilton pits, finally, having lost out on the safety car strategy. Norris also pits onto softs, but has a slow stop, but still stays ahead of Hamilton. So the last few laps we're kind of seeing if Norris and Hamilton could catch Behrman, but he held them off so they didn't get close. And then Ricciardo had a spin. He just had a shocker of a weekend, really. He was out-qualified by Yuki. Not his fault, but there was a 50-second pit stop under the safety car that put him last. And then this was his fault. I mean, he spun the car by himself, so not a good look. Didn't seem happy with the car all weekend. He said he couldn't get much more out of the car in quali. He's usually pretty quick to own up if he just didn't have the pace or he missed something. But this time it seemed like there was something they weren't understanding with the car that he said they got answers for after the race. Although, anyway, we'll save Australia for next time. So that's the race. We had Verstappen, Perez, Leclerc, a classic podium at this point. Oscar Piastri, P4. That was really good. You can see Alonso having managed to hold it to P5. That is a pretty incredible result for Aston, considering where that car is at the moment. And then the British Brigade. 4 British drivers in the top 10. Like, that's crazy. And the Brits they're a bit too happy, actually. I think they were a bit too excited about Oliver Behrman. I don't know. If it was 4 Australian drivers, I'd be pretty excited too. So we're kind of forced to listen to a bunch of British people. As the English-speaking fans, they kind of are the ones yapping at us. So it gets annoying. Oliver Behrman, a deserved driver of the day. And this image is crazy. It really shows the step up between F2 and F1, because his headrest, as you can see, is bent. Like, from resting his head against it in the high-speed corners, he'd actually managed to bend it. I'm not sure how firm that is, but I mean, other drivers don't really do that. So obviously it was really hard on him physically. That's a good reminder, I guess. F1 fans often forget how intense it is physically, but it's crazy. He's got to go back to the gym, work on his neck. Is F1 still washed? After Bahrain, people were going, oh shit, it's over. And I was here saying like, oh my God, I still love F1. Loser still likes F1. Watch the video up there. It didn't look that good for the rest of the season. The cars are definitely harder to pass, definitely harder to follow. I shouldn't say harder to pass, because overtaking isn't everything that makes an entertaining race. It has to be like good overtakes, like not a DRS pass is like doesn't do anything for me. So it has to be tuned well. It has to be difficult to pass so that it's spectacular when one happens, but it can't be so difficult that it's impossible. And here, the cars were clearly much harder to follow. There wasn't that pass and repass energy that this track has had. Even last year's race wasn't like we could see this starting, like the cars were getting harder to race. But they are definitely harder to race now. And I think the FIA hasn't done enough since 2022 to rein the teams in on breaking the spirit of the regulations. Is F1 washed? This race had a lot though. It was actually a pretty entertaining race overall. It wasn't entertaining, like the entertaining moments weren't the racing moments, which I think is what gets this reaction. But as I said, you know, if you want to watch really tight racing, there are plenty of other motorsport series for that. F1 is more about like a narrative and the drama and other things. So this race had that. It had a lot to see. Yeah, I think we need to rein the cars in the next couple of years. Hopefully after 2026, what I want to see is the FIA issue new rules yearly. Very slight tweaks and stuff to keep the teams on their toes and shake things up and keep the cars easier to follow. I think F1's fine at the moment. I think the cars actually probably are still easier to drive than 2021, or still easier to race than 2021, but could be better. Lastly, silly season 2024. I mean, this is probably the main reason to be watching F1 at the moment. It is going to be crazy, and in that spirit, Carlos Sainz Sr. and Carlos's manager were seen leaving Mercedes hospitality with Toto Wolff after the race. Will he go to Mercedes? Will he go to Red Bull? Will he go to Sauber/Audi? Remains to be seen, but it's going to be exciting. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, please like, give me a comment, let's chat, and subscribe if you want to see more. Next up, we got Australia next week. Well, not next week. It already happened. I'm behind. Anyway, see you then. Bye.